Hey, everybody. I hope you're having a great Monday evening. It is Monday, right? Anyone tell now that we're still sort of in a pandemic, I think. I'm Joel Strimling. I'm the Communications Director of Oregon Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. Welcome all to our virtual Pint Night on bear hunting, all things bear hunting. And I am super thrilled to have my friend and co-host special guest for the night, Gary Lewis. If you saw on the pressers and releases, Gary's an author, a journalist, a photographer, just a great hunter and a great ambassador for hunting. I've actually gotten even to have my nephew go fishing with him, and
right.
just it's been a real pleasure. So we're excited to have him on board, and of course, hear all of his knowledge. And at the end, we'll certainly have some questions and answers. And if you aren't familiar with how Crowdcast works, there is an Ask a Question button at the bottom of the screen. You should be able to tap on that and type in a specific question that we'll read later, rather than having them over in the side column where you can have your conversations, because otherwise it's very hard for us to scroll up and down and find those. So we do ask that you use that Ask a Question button. So hopefully everyone is excited to get started. But before we actually start talking to Gary, we did promise some really cool giveaways, right, Gary?
Yes, we did.
Yeah, that's right. And one of the things Gary's giving away is a copy of his brand new book, Born Ballistic, as the John Nosler, Bob Nosler. Why did I say John? Bob Nosler story. That's bad of me. I even use Nosler. So we did a random drawing when we opened everything up here, and we opened up with the book is going to John Stevens of Calgary, Canada. So, no, Jordan, not John. I'm sorry, Jordan Stevens. I apologize. Jordan Stevens of Calgary, Canada. So Jordan, we'll have your email from when you signed up, and we'll shoot you an email with the information, or rather the information we need from you, so we can have Gary send you that book. So I hope you're excited to get it. I know I've got my copy on order. So, and then also one of our wonderful friends and kind of people who support us is, of course, Nosler. And they definitely wanted to help out as well. So they actually have swag bags that they're giving away. We have 2 of those. Comes with a hat, some stickers, a pretty nice insulated Nosler mug, and their reloading guide, which is super cool. And I'm a bit jealous that I'm not in on that raffle. And the first winner of one of those is someone I actually know, and it's not a fix, I swear. And that's Josh Freiberg. So Josh, we'll get a hold of you, obviously, and we'll get that bag sent over to you from Nosler. So hopefully you'll have some use for that. So that's the first 2 prizes. We'll give away some more at the end, so stick around. And like I said, we'll have some Q&A. But without further ado, I just want to hand the floor over to the immeasurable Gary Lewis. Thank you so much, Gary.
Well, it is really good to be here and see everybody almost on the screen. I already see some people I know, the names popping up on the screen here. I'm going to switch over to our PowerPoint here for tonight and share that so everybody can see that. I think that should come up good now. We're going to talk spring bear hunting primarily. We're also going to talk about fall bear hunting, and in Oregon and beyond. One of the things that I notice when I give these presentations is that I leave out some things that are important for you guys. And apparently we're going to have a question and answer session tonight. And so that's going to be a good opportunity to ask a question that I forgot to answer while we were talking here. So we'll just get right into it. We're going to go for about an hour, and then we'll do questions and answers after that. So we're not just talking Oregon. We're going to talk about black bear hunting across the West, and as it coincides with this run up to the opening of spring bear season in April 1 in Oregon and in other states too. So let's get into this. This was the first bear that I ever got. This was up in Alaska on Prince of Wales Island, and I was super excited to be on a dedicated bear hunt after years of carrying a black bear tag around in my pocket and having a couple of opportunities and not capitalizing on them. And one of the most important things to me, I have that hide on the wall, but one of the most important things was getting a bear claw necklace made. And so I'm proud of this. This is one that I had made from the biggest bear that I got a few years ago on a hunt in California. So that's look at my first bear. One of the things I want to stress is that when you become a bear hunter, you really turn a corner in your hunting life. And somebody asked me recently, what do you mean how to be a bear hunter? Aren't you just a hunter? And no, you're not. You have to change a little bit about how you're wired as a hunter when you want to be successful at it. And so I think one of the things to start with is just to know that there's a philosophy that goes into being a bear hunter, and it begins to inform the way that you plan your hunts for the year and for the years to come. And for instance, right now, I am planning a hunt in 2023. And so that's how I keep track of things. I know what I'm looking ahead to, looking forward to, and that'll be 2023 or 24 back in Minnesota. And I say plan not just one bear hunt, but plan 2 or 3 bear hunts a year. And then you want to hunt where bear numbers are high. You want to plan for spring hunts, fall hunts in your own state, and then out of state. So in Oregon, since a lot of people that are tuned in here might be Oregonians, we're going to talk about this. You've got to apply by February 10th. The hunt starts April 1st. You got through the end of May in our state. In places in Idaho, you can hunt well into June. The best time to hunt, we're going to try to cover that tonight. And in our state, the easiest northeast hunt to draw is the South Blue Mountains. And then here's a list of our top Northeast Oregon hunts as measured by harvest success. And there's some other good ones there. And so some of you have drawn tags for some of these hunts this year, and you're looking forward to that. But when we talk about harvest success, that's another thing to kind of back up and talk about philosophy again, because on a lot of these spring bear hunts, they turn into just a great opportunity to be outside after a long winter. And especially if you're tired of wearing a mask and social distance of 6 feet is just not enough for you. You want to social distance by 6 miles. A spring bear hunt is a good way to do it. And so I try to have a turkey tag and be planning to take an opportunistic turkey, while I'm bear hunting too. And the wildflowers are coming up, and you get to see elk and deer as they're transitioning and getting healthy again after a hard winter. So as I'm planning my hunts, I think back on places that I've been. I like to try to go where bear numbers are high. And so for me, in my bear hunting career, that's been Northern California, Southwest Oregon, Northeast Oregon, the Salmon River in Idaho, the Olympic Peninsula in Washington, Vancouver Island, Southeast Alaska, Prince of Wales Island, the Chugach National Forest, and so the Superior National Forest in Minnesota. So there's lots and lots of good bear hunting opportunity. Let's take a look at some of these pictures. That one in the upper right-hand corner, that particular bear was spotted at long range, maybe 500 yards away, and they were able to stalk in and get within 15 yards of that bedded black bear. And my friend John, the hunter on that particular hunt, he actually missed that bear at very close range, woke it up, and it jumped up, and he ran the bolt and got it on a quick second shot. So one of the things, well, we're going to talk about long range spotting and stalking. So we'll get into that. So mindset, philosophy, bear hunting will change your life. My father went on a bear hunt with me in 2001. And a few years later, I said, Dad, how did that change your life? And he said, Gary, I've thought about that a lot since then. He said, I've made more money because I went on that bear hunt. I said, okay, tell me about that. And he said, I have to make cold calls in his business. He IT professional calling on large companies for computer services. And he said that this bear hunt made him a more successful salesperson because he realized he had faced down one of his fears and took a bear on its terms up in Alaska. It was a big bear, 6'9", as stretched nose to tail, and bear hunting changed his life, and it can change your life too. Hunt bear more often, spot and stalk, over bait with hounds. If you have a bias against one of the bear hunting methods, I say it's get over that and hunt bear in as many different ways as you can. Open your mind, and it will expand your opportunity, and you will have more and more and more encounters with bears. It's one of those situations where if you believe that you will see more bears, you will do the things you have to do and make the changes in your hunting style, and the bear encounters you have will just go up. When I first started hunting bears, I'd seen a few, but after that first really successful bear hunt, man, it just went up from there. And I see Joel nodding his head there. Joel can attest to that too. Always apply.
I hunted for years without seeing a bear. So last year was the breakthrough. As you know, Gary, I saw, I think 6 bears in 8 days.
And it's really, you said it right. It's really a breakthrough. Those bears have been there all the time, but you didn't have your mind in the place where it needed to be to actually have those encounters. I firmly believe that you change that philosophy and you change your success. And so I measure my bear hunts, maybe not in terms of the meat that I bring back, but in terms of the numbers of bear encounters that I have and what I learn about them. I look at the first month of the fall season as my favorite time to hunt bears in that season. So we're looking at the month of August in the state of Oregon. And I would be hunting by the 10th or 12th of August, and then hunting through that first week of September because of my style of hunting and where I think the bears are going to be with the food source. And that's what it's all about all the time. It's always about the feed. Even in the breeding season, the sows are on the top food sources, and that's where the boars are going to be following them. It is always about the feed, and the feed changes week to week throughout the season, throughout the year. Okay, bears are more social than you think. Bears might ignore major food sources while they're focused on other food sources. In September, it was August actually of 2019, we found 11 food sources that we could say were for sure in full season, full ripeness, and the bears were on one thing. There was apples and pears, there was choke cherry, there was Indian plums and Italian plums, and a bunch of other types of berries, but the bears were only on the hawthorn berries in that particular unit. And it was so amazing to me to walk around underneath an apple tree where apples are falling on the ground and not find bear scat. And the bear that we bagged, its stomach was full of hawthorn berries, and all the bears in that area seemed to be in this one particular canyon where they were getting one particular strain of hawthorn berries. It was amazing. Bears don't weigh as much as your friends say they do. And then maybe the last most important thing is sit in one good place. And a lot of people say, well, I can't sit in a tree stand. I can't sit in one place for more than 30 minutes. Well, get over that. Fix that. You can change yourself. You can change that thing about you. And you can sit in one good place for 8 hours. You can sit there for 10 hours. And it's just a matter of believing that you can do it and getting your mind in the place where you can make that happen. Okay, this is on that hunt where 11 different types of foods were in ripeness and ripe and available, and the bears were all in the hawthorn berries. This bear came out, you can see in the bottom middle, the little black dot there, that was a big bear. It was swinging its head side to side. I spotted that. It was the last hour of the last day of a 3-day hunt, and that bear came down across the top of a ridge, went down into a canyon, and when we got into that canyon, there was at least 4 different bears in this narrow, tiny little canyon, and we managed to get one out of there. That's that bear there. If you look at that picture on the upper left, that is the bear that we took, and my producer was with me, Sam Pike, and he was the one that spotted it as it popped out of the bushes right on the edge of the brush line, and it went broadside. And because we were filming a television episode, he said, I'm not on it. And I had a broadside double lung shot, the exact shot that I always want to have. And Sam said he wasn't on it. And then he said, okay, I'm on it. And as soon as he had it in frame, as soon as he had it focused, the bear stood up and it gave me that look. And that was the moment that I touched off. And this is the bullet I was using, 190 grain AccuBond long range, and I put it right on the corner of that white patch on its chest. And this is a shot that's really spooky to me. It's a spooky shot to take because you're probably not going to hit the spine, even though that's a possibility. You're probably going to get one of the lungs, and that's not exactly what I want. I want a double lung or a broken shoulder, and with a shot like this, you're going to have to make another shot really, really quick. Okay, let's go back to philosophy a bit for a second. When people think about hunting bear for the first time, there's a few things that seem to get in people's way. And one of the things that I hear from time to time is people say, I actually don't get a bear tag because my uncle told me that a bear looks like a human when it's hanging from the meat pole. Well, okay, that's not true. Bear looks like a bear when it's hanging from a meat pole. You skin it, it still looks like a bear. It doesn't look like anything except for a bear. And guess what? It is a bear. It's not a human. And it is, I think, if we're complete hunters, we should also be hunting bears. And one of the things that's exciting about hunting bears to me is that you can use so much of the animal when you begin to think about it and open your mind. You use as much of it as possible. The hide, the claws, you can make bear grease for donuts and pastries. You can clean your shoes with it. I put it in my hair. You put the skull. You can bleach the skull out and use that, display that. Keep the organ meat, cut that up and feed it to your dog. And then the steaks, the burgers, the roast, and the sausage. Now, here's the other thing. People say I heard that bear meat isn't all that good. Well, really, it comes down to one, how you take care of the bear in the field, how you process it, and keeping it as clean as possible. And then using, you use what you know about the bear. If that bear has been eating berries and nuts, that is going to be a really good tasting bear. If it's a fish eating bear, yeah, it's going to taste different. And so that can also inform where you decided to hunt. Okay, what are you going to do with it? Sausage, burger, steaks, and roast. Make a big coat out of it. Make a bear rug, pillows, make a vest, render the fat for pie crusts and biscuits, use grease for muzzle loading. This is one of the things that I make sure I do. If I get a really good fat bear, I render that down, and we'll talk about that after a bit. These are some pictures from a hunt I really like to do in Minnesota. And after I hunted bears over bait in Minnesota, and I could have done it in Canada or further back on the East Coast, I realized I want to do this the rest of my life. It's thrilling. It's exciting. You get bear encounters. You get to see sows and cubs, and you see small bears and large bears, and you track them with your trail cameras. You get to go out and help set the baits, and you just learn more and more, and then you make friends in other places. And so I wish I had started doing these hunts in Minnesota 15 years ago, but I'm planning to do these all the rest of my life. Here's a couple of bears, or one bear from the last hunt in Minnesota, and take a look at the baits. What's been really interesting, what I've learned about this, is that bears in one part of the world, they like to eat stuff that's different than bears in a different part of the world. It's really hard to say, well, bears like this and bears like that and bears do this. The bear is a complex animal. It's an individual. And what I learned about these Minnesota bears is they don't like to eat meat as much as they like to eat other things. So what you see here is peanut butter, trail mix, and different sorts of candies and that sort of thing. Okay, now we've talked enough about that. I think I want to talk about calling black bears. This is one of my favorite subjects. And if you live in a state that does not allow hunting with hounds and does not allow hunting over bait, then calling black bears is one of the most important skills that you can learn. And it's not hard. All it takes is just a little understanding about how it works. And I see Backcountry Hunters has just put a little link up here about rendering bear fat for baking. That is awesome. I fully support that. Go and look at that after we're done here. Calling black bears. So constant calling. I like to think that the reason that we call constantly is because maybe they have short attention spans. And if you quit calling and lay off the calling for a few minutes like we do when we're trying to call coyotes, the bear might find something else and begin to focus on that. So we call for an hour. It always works better if you see the bear first. Pay attention to the wind. I like to be able to walk up to a canyon with the wind in my face and sit down and begin to watch the canyon. And if this is something that I've planned to do for the rest of the day, I might watch that canyon for several hours. But if it's time to put the call to work, and this is the call I'm using mostly right now, it's a Fox Pro Shockwave. And I've used a couple of different models of the Fox Pro, and that's just the current one that I use now. I always carry a mouth call with me as well, because sometimes the batteries run low and run out in these things, and you need to just keep on going. But watch the downwind side, because bears and other predators will circle to the downwind side to make sure that they're not walking in on something they don't want to run into. A bear probably doesn't want to run into a pack of wolves. It doesn't maybe want to run into a bigger bear, and it just wants to know what's going to be there before it goes in. It's possibly it's coming to a fight, and so it wants to come in on the downwind side if it can, and then believe that this will work. I keep a journal. The first bear I called successfully came in 1 minute. And later that day, I called in another bear. That one came in 15 minutes. I have a lot of entries in my journal where the bears showed up in the 40s, and especially at 52 minutes, at 53 minutes, 57 minutes, 59 minutes. And for me, the limit on calling is about an hour, and then I'll sit and watch for 5 or 10 minutes before I get up, just to see if something might be coming in slow. But I've never actually had something come in after that 60-minute mark. But every bear will respond differently to this. I've had them charge in, and I've had them run the other direction. I've had them sit down, and I've had them get annoyed and leave. So you don't know what's going on in that bear's world at that moment, but you have to sell the scenario. And so if you start off with a certain type of call and then you want to change to a different sound, that's okay. That is probably not going to mess things up. If I decide that wounded rabbit is the call that I'm using on this particular day, I'll use the wounded rabbit and I'll switch to another rabbit in distress sound and try to change the sound. Sometimes that changes the success. That's my daughter Jennifer on the left with her first bear when she was 12. And that's the one that swam across the Imnaha River to get to the call. And that's my friend Todd Lum with his bear. That one was there the whole time when we began to call, and it got up after 15 minutes and began leaving across the canyon. What was funny about this was Todd says, "Is it a big bear?" And my thought was it was smaller than Jennifer's, but that was only the perspective that I had. And when he shot the bear and we went and recovered it, I found that it was exactly the same size. They both measured 5 foot 6 inches from the tip of their nose to the tip of their tails. Jennifer's bear was just full of fat, and then Todd's bear, just a half a mile away, had hardly any fat on it at all. And it just proves one bear had a different type of lifestyle than the other. And they're both the same size. One was fat and one wasn't. And what you see in that lower left picture is the rendered fat from Jennifer's bear. And when we got back that evening, my wife had made 2 apple pies with the apples that were falling on the ground around the place we were staying, and that good clean fat that we had rendered out of that first bear in the middle of the day that day. So I count that as the best hunting day of my life. Can you learn to tell a bear's sex on sight? I believe you can. It comes down to the shape of the body. Quickly, I try to look at the bear's attitude and read its body language, and that often tells me if it's got cubs with it, even if I don't see them. And then 2 bears together early in the spring is often a sow and a cub. 2 bears together late in the spring is often a male and a female as the breeding season kicks off. And it's very, very important that you know what's legal in the state where you're hunting, because every state looks at this differently. Let's take 3 states, for example, Washington. No, we'll talk Oregon, Idaho, and Minnesota. In Oregon, it's legal to take a bear with yearlings. Anyone, if there's a bear and 2 yearlings with it, any one of those bears is a legal bear. If it's a sow with cubs, none of those bears are legal. In Idaho, a sow with cubs or a sow with yearlings, none of those bears are legal. In Minnesota, the sow is legal and the cubs are not. So when you travel, you got to figure that out in advance so that you don't make the kinds of mistakes that get you into trouble later. The bear on the upper left and the bear on the lower left, we saw about a 1/4 mile apart in the same river canyon. Totally different behavior from both of these animals. The one in the upper left, when it became aware that we were there, it sat down just like you see, and it began to scratch itself. And it scratched itself all over its body. We watched it for 20 minutes or so. This other bear downstream, it was hunting a sow and cubs. I think it was trying to eat the cubs. And that bear was an aggressive bear and one to keep its eye on. That other bear was totally satisfied and calm. Super interesting to read their body language. And if you look at that bear, that on the lower left, obviously a boar, and obviously a boar on the upper left. This is a hunt in Idaho. I chose this hunt because it was a 2-bear unit in the Salmon River and the Gospel Hump Wilderness, and we were actually hunting with Shep Ranch on this one. I had been through a long-range shooting course, a 4-day course with Daryl Holland in Powers, Oregon, and had the rifle and the scope and the data and the math, everything I needed to be successful at long range on this hunt. Long range in those days was maybe not what people would consider long range in these days, as people's skills have gotten better and the rifles and scopes have gotten better. But we came up over this ridge, and the first thing I saw in this canyon was a bear on the other side. And we got the range at 306 yards, and I took a rest using the bipod and doing the math, and I forgot the one thing that I know about shooting downhill, and that's you want to hold low on that shot. And so I held on the regular spot where I'd hold if I was shooting on across flat ground, and I missed. And I knew I'd missed, and I knew exactly what I'd done wrong. And the bear ran around in a circle and went up on top of a boulder and stopped and gave me a broadside look again. And now I felt good about the shot, took the shot. And I turned and I looked at Rex, who was with me, and who was the guide on that hunt. And he said, "Well, you missed it." And I didn't think I'd missed it. And I looked at Tim, the taxidermist, McClagan, with me and he says, "I think you hit it, Gary." And Rex says, "No, you missed it." He said, "It's okay. Lots of people miss. I see it on every trip," he said, "and we'll just go find another one." And I said, "Okay, well, I still have to go down there and look for it." And he said, "Yeah, you're right." So we went down there, and the bear had only gone about 5 steps, and it was laying with its head in the creek, and I'd shot it right through the lungs. And we collected that bear because I believed that I had made a good shot, and I also believed that I had to do right by the animal by going and looking. and we could have very easily walked away from that one. And I think that happens sometimes, and we just have to guard against it. And, you know, they say trust your guide, and they're right about that, but you also have to trust yourself and your instincts and what you know is right. This is up in Alaska, and that's another boar down walking on the beach behind me where we were catching salmon. Also, it's back to this thing about attitude and the bear's body language really telling you what it is. Bears are really hard to judge, especially if you aren't familiar with the area that you're hunting. And if you're going into a new area for the first time, the scale of the area is different than where you live and the other places you've hunted. So I'm up in a tree when I took this picture. I'm pretty high up in a tree, but the trail that these bears walked out on was only 11 paces from the bottom of the tree. So I'm very close. And when the first bear walked out, I said to myself, there's a bear. And since I didn't have anything to judge it by, I couldn't say whether it was big or small. And it might sound odd, but then another bear walked out and it was the exact same size. And I thought, oh, there's another bear. It's the exact same size. That's a cub. And they're both cubs. And then the sow walked out. And then it was really easy to see that it's a nice sized average sow that is with two cubs, and it's in Minnesota where that sow is legal for me to take it. And I chose not to because I was holding out for a larger bear and I didn't want to leave a couple of cubs without their mother. Now, people always want to talk about rifles, and it makes sense. I think the bear rifle that you take is the largest rifle that you own that you could shoot well. And we probably don't need to go really deep into that, except what do I like? I like a 30 caliber or larger. And then the optics are tuned to the situation. If I'm hunting from a tree stand and I'm expecting the shots to be up close range, I want, one of those loophole 2 to 7s or a good 3 to 9, and I'll dial it down to 2 power or 3 power, because anything more than that at 11 paces, it's really hard to pick up the spot on the bear that you need to shoot. And if it's longer range, then high power optics, 4.5 to 12. We have lots and lots of options now, but be careful that you don't bring the wrong scope on a hunt where it's not matched for the distances that you're going to take. Bullet choice is super important. I think you use high quality bullets and you make one good shot, one really good shot, and then you begin to follow it up with another good shot and another if necessary. There's a thing that we subscribe to called one shot, one kill. And people hoping to establish their bragging rights to one shot, one kill often let their animals go because they didn't follow up with another shot. And I totally believe that you shoot until that animal is down, and you don't have to have those regrets when it gets up and runs away. This is my dad on his bear hunt, and a big solid bear. He took this one with a 300 Winchester Magnum, and then that was a borrowed rifle then, and he had practiced with a 7mm Magnum and had gotten really good with it, and then the scope failed the week before the hunt, and I had to quickly borrow another rifle. So big bear, super proud of that bear. It was rubbed on all of its paws. The hide was rubbed, but that didn't detract from, yeah, that's a huge bear. 300 Winchester Magnum, 300 Winchester Short Mag, those are good choices. This hunt right here, the top two pictures, we called a bear in 57 minutes. Okay, now this was about the 10th of August, 15th of August perhaps, in Oregon, in the Cascades. The blackberries were ripe, and the bears were in a patch of blackberries off and on, so we knew where they were feeding. The scat was on the roads, and when we went to watch the berry patch, we watched for a long time and no bears showed themselves, and so then we began to call, and the bear showed itself in 57 minutes. And when it showed, it was just coming slow, and it was taking bites of yummy foliage or berries as it came along, and it was not running in, it was just coming in slow, like it was having salad before the main course. This picture at the bottom, there were a sow and two cubs we were watching in that clearing. They were 700 yards away, and this is my trophy from that hunt, was this picture, taking a picture of those bears through the scope. And I knew I had the technology that I could shoot one of these bears, and I also knew that I was not going to do it, and I called that a good hunt, and we walked away from that situation because recovering the bear would have been very difficult in that situation. Public land in Oregon in the Coast Range. Bear on the left is a California bear. It's the one that these claws came from. And we took that on a hunt with hounds. I'd never been on a hound hunt before, and it was one of the highlights of a hunting career to me. And then this upper right, that was a hunt with the Quinault Indians on the Quinault Indian Reservation over bait, and also a super special hunt. And then this is a big Minnesota bear on the lower right. Bear hunting, it will teach you a lot of things. That's an 11-year-old hunter in the bottom, in the middle. And that guy is 16 or 17 years old now. But on that hunt, he and his brother were struggling after several days to have an opportunity at a bear, and we met with some tribal elders, and we talked to them about the bears and the conservation. And then this guy pulls out a drum and he sang his grandfather's spear song, and this was a song that was passed down from his grandfather, maybe removed 7, 8, 9, 10 generations, and the song had been passed down grandfather to father to son to son to son to son till it had reached him. And he was about my age, and we were sitting on the ground at the mouth of a river where it emptied into the ocean. And when he was done singing that song, he nodded. He wouldn't look at me, and he nodded and pointed at the boys, and he says, "They'll get their bear tonight." And Chisel was the one that bear walked out. Bear hunting will get you into some situations. This is a situation that could change your life. That guy holding onto the door is keeping that truck from sliding down into the canyon. And the guy in the driver's seat is going through his glove box and taking the stuff out of the ashtray and just in case the truck slides all the way down into the canyon. And we asked them if they needed any help, and they said that they had a machine coming down to put a cable on, and they were hoping that it was going to get there in time. And I could only imagine that machine rumbling down that road and the vibrations of what it's going to do to that Ford. Okay, so here's a little sidebar. If you're planning a trip to Alaska and you're wondering, okay, I'm going to be in a situation where I might be fishing, there might be bears on the river. The last thing you want to do is be in a situation where you have to defend your life with a handgun or bear spray. But every year people are in those situations, and a bear that wasn't a trouble bear before now is a trouble bear, and for whatever reason, and maybe it's been fed, and maybe it's grumpy for some reason. But what do you carry? So what do we have here in the upper right? A couple of Glocks. One is a 40, and the other is a 10 millimeter, and then in the middle is a 480 Ruger that I've carried on some fishing trips. I carry it in a holster right up in the front over the top of my waders. And then I always also carry a can of bear spray with me, because I would rather use the bear spray than the gun if I have to, but I want to have both of them. But the thing is you want to practice. And after every trip to Alaska, I take out that can of bear spray that I just bought the week before, and then I try it to see how it works. And I've never had one work as advertised. You can see the amount, the volume of that spray has not gone very far. And if you think you're going to stop a charging bear at that distance, well, good luck. But I carry both with me when I'm fishing in places where there's a lot of bears. This is on the Russian River, this lower picture. But that's a sidebar. Practice with the gun. You don't just carry the gun and use it like a good luck charm. And the same with the bear spray. Okay, how to take pictures of your bear. Now, I promised this one to you, Joel. Okay, first rule on taking pictures of any animal in the field or any live animal: to get the camera below the eyes and then contrast. What do I mean by contrast? I mean, you put a red shirt on underneath your camo, and then when you bag the bear, then you take your camo shirt off, and then you had a really nice picture with that red shirt. Elevate the bear, comb its hair, clean it up, and just have a lot of fun with this. And oh, Joel, you say you carry the 10 millimeter. Yeah, that is awesome. I'm a big believer in that. Okay, see what else we got here for some pictures. This was a huge bear that Tony's holding the paw of in this picture. We'll show you a picture of it. That's it over here on the right. And some average sized bears that these kids got. This one with a bow and arrow, and this one with a rifle, and then this one in the front is Tony's bear. Another good average sized bear. We talk about judging and field judging bears, and there's different ways to approach this. The way I do is I look at its ears first, and then I look at its legs. And so what I want to see, what I'm looking for, if I'm truly holding out for a big bear, I'm looking for the ears on the side of its head. So you look at Tony's bear here, and you see if this is a triangle from the tips of these ears to the tip of the nose, you can see that the base of the triangle back here at the ears is longer than this distance from here to here. So that's one way if you're a geometry expert. And you'll also notice when you look at this head that there's almost a crease in that skull. And then the muzzle is a light brown. And to me, I look at that muzzle, I think that's an older bear. Then when you look at these bears, you see that their ears are closer together, smaller heads, and smaller bears. Now, I don't think we should be ashamed of taking average size bears. And we shouldn't judge what we're doing to compare with what maybe somebody else's bear. And each bear is different, and we should be proud of these animals. And I think we should take bears, legal bears, when we get a chance to. And sometimes they're going to be smaller and sometimes they're going to be larger. And over the course of a person's career, you're going to take average size bears and large size bears. It's all part of that philosophy. Learn to skin a bear. And because when the time comes that you need to know that skill, carry some of those instructions with you. Go to a taxidermist before your hunt, and sometimes they'll have a little handout that'll show you what you need to know as you're skinning a bear, and then know what bear scat looks like. So I think that's important too. Let's go back and talk about scouting in the spring of the season. So maybe we use these pictures here. In the spring, one of the things I'm looking for is the arrowleaf balsam root. And in Northeast Oregon, the arrowleaf seems to show up in late April. And what the Nez Perce and the Umatilla Indians said was, when the arrowleaf balsam root is in bloom, that the bears are coming out of their dens. And you could say the same thing about the pink dogwood. The pink dogwoods are in bloom right now in Western Oregon, earlier than we used to see them. And the other thing in Western Oregon I'm looking for is skunk cabbage. So if I'm planning a hunt in Western Oregon and I find skunk cabbage is in profusion, like I found it along the Wilson River a couple of days ago when I was over there, I think, well, perhaps the bears are out of their dens early. But as far as hunt timing goes, in the spring, they're eating a lot of grass, and then they're eating the fiddleheads on the ferns and the new buds on the willows, and the foliage as it's ripening and growing. And it's only a little bit later that they start to focus more on eating meat. And as that grass grows, it's going to grow where the sun hits it first. So the south facing slopes. And then as the sun cycles and the days grow longer, that sunlight penetrates more to the bottoms of the canyons, and then the bears will follow that best grass from maybe the slopes down into the canyons. And then you'll find bears feeding along roads where there's grass in the old road beds and along the sides of roads that may or may not be still being used. Wherever you find that newest, greenest, freshest grass, that's where you're more likely to find the bears. And if you find fresh scat, you don't need to leave. You don't need to go find another place, because you found a place where bears are. And if you don't see them right away, you try to find one good place to watch from and then wait for them to show themselves a lot of times in a place like this where I'm standing in that upper right in that valley, a place like this, a bear will feed for a few hours and then rest and take a nap. And if it's bedded, it might be bedded in a spot that you can't see it. It might be bedded in tall grass or laying, up against a boulder where it's getting that reflected heat. And then it'll get up and it'll start to move again. And in a place like this, in a 2-bear area in Idaho and some of our best units in Northeast Oregon and Washington, there can be a bear in every canyon. And some of them are antisocial, and there'll be one bear in a canyon, and in some canyons there'll be more than one bear. But you can believe in some of these places that there's a bear in every canyon, and if you can keep your scent out of there, you'll not spook it, and you'll have a chance to see it. It's all about managing your scent. But remember that it is about the feed more than anything else, and the feed can change. And the locations where they find that good grass can change from week to week. I like to start to hunt about the 3rd week of April. That's in Northeast Oregon. That's what I'm looking for. And that can be a little earlier in Southwest Oregon. It just kind of depends on what kind of winter we had. And in a situation where we've had a mild winter like this one, I think the bears are going to be waking up earlier and you're going to have more opportunities. Okay, let's see if we got anything else to talk about here.
We do have a lot of questions too, Gary. So whenever you feel like you've wrapped up what you want to present, and obviously take your time doing it, but just as a sidebar, we've got some great questions I've been kind of tracking. So I'm sure you'll have a lot of
I can't wait to get into the questions. I have a television show. It's called Frontier Unlimited, and it can be viewed in a lot of different ways. We're on the Hunt channel. It's called huntchannel.tv, and it's streaming on the Hunt channel there, and also on video on demand. So that's Frontier Unlimited. Also have a podcast. It's called The Ballistic Chronicles. And so let's go ahead and start taking some questions, Joel.
Well, before I do that, I just want to say, first off, Gary beat me to it. I definitely was going to tell everyone to definitely check out both his TV show. That Quinault hunt is actually on it. I watched that the other day, Gary. I thought that was super cool. The it was, I think you said, I can't remember the title, something about silence. And it was just that show. If people aren't, familiar with bear hunting and getting out in the woods and really just hearing that nothing, that was that just took me back. So I really encourage everyone to check that one out. The podcast he has is great, and he does have a series of podcasts that's on Spotify as well as other places. And there is I think is it 5-part right now, Gary, on bear hunting itself as well. So you can check that out. There's also a lot of other good things on the podcast. Perfect. Yeah, so there's some great information there. We just wanted to have Gary on because obviously this is a lot more detailed. So first off, before we dive into questions, again, I just want to say thanks so much to Gary for his time and for showing up, and all the people out there watching. It's awesome. I do want to plug BHA, of course. You probably see on the bottom here, there's a little button that says join BHA now and get a free public landowner shirt. So if you aren't familiar with BHA, if you're new, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us through any sort of social media or emails. Just let us know any questions. We can kind of let you know who we are, what we do. One question I wanted to make sure we covered, Gary, because I didn't know if anyone would ask it quite in the same way, was because I know you and I have talked about how hard it is to kind of get started in bear hunting. And there's a lot of people who were telling me this was going to be their first season bear hunting, and they were coming to watch this. So what would you tell someone who's a first-time bear hunter? They're like, I just go in the woods and I don't see any bear. I don't even know where to go. I mean, it's such a big learning curve for bear, maybe bigger than deer or anything else I've been a part of. So is there something you can say to help them kind of narrow that a little?
Great question. And then before I forget, I love seeing people wearing those public landowner shirts. And I have one, and I just love seeing them out there. I think the most important thing you can do is figure out where the food is and what the food source is right now. Okay, so let's say it's the first week of April and you can't wait. You've got to get out and go hunting for bears. And so what it's going to be fresh green grass. And the new growth on the willows and the new growth in wetter environments, there might be some skunk cabbage there in swampy areas, but wherever the sun hits the slopes, where grass grows, closed roads, that's a good place to start. And if you are using that first week of the season, first 3 weeks of the season as scouting time, there's nothing wrong with that. And you're looking for fresh scat. If you find that fresh scat, you've found bear habitat, at least for the moment. And it's going to change as the season gets older. And I noticed somebody asked a question, how does strategy change from spring to fall? Well, it definitely changes, but it changes according to what the bears are feeding on. And after they get their digestive juices flowing, after coming out of the den, and they come out at different times. There'll be bears that'll come out of the den earlier, 3 weeks earlier than other bears. They're all individuals and they're all found different places to spend the winter time. But as I get later in the spring season, if I'm calling, I'm going to be using more and more cub sounds with my calls in May, mid-May and late May, because you can bring in a big boar that wants to kill cubs. Because if a boar can kill a sow's cubs, it can bring that cow into heat. That sow into heat.
That's a good point. I actually had a friend of mine who shot a bear that had treed 2 cubs, and the sow was trying to fend off a boar, and he actually managed to take out the boar. So it was a great, all in all, kind of a win-win story. Before we do dive into the questions that are asked below, which is awesome, and everyone feel free to keep posting there, I did want to mention, of course, we have 2 more giveaways. I want to manage those before we get too far into the evening, because I figured during the questions, some people might have to jump in and out. So first off, we did have another Nosler swag bag for those that weren't here right at the start. Nosler graciously donated a couple of swag bags that include a trucker hat, some decals, a insulated Nosler logo mug, and a reloading guide manual. So that book is actually really cool. I'm a little jealous of that one because I've been thinking about getting into reloading. Oh, see, and he's got it right there on his bookshelf. That's awesome. Product placement. And while we've been sitting here chatting, we kind of rolled some numbers, and the winner of the bag is Jeremy Thorpe of Eugene. So Jeremy, hopefully you're online, and we will email you and get your personal information so we can have Nosler send you that swag bag, which is pretty cool. The other thing that everyone was hopefully kind of excited about was we do have a BHA logo knife from our friends at Gerber. So they graciously donated that, and it comes with a sheath, so you don't have to have a sheath. And Jeremy says, thanks, great, Jeremy, congrats. So the winner of the knife, we also randomly rolled that number, is, and I'm going to butcher this name, so I apologize, is Mark Siwick, S-I-W-E-K, I think they said it was, out of Bend. So Mark, again, same thing, get a hold of us, and we can make sure that we get you that knife and get that set up for you. So, happy that everyone got those, and hopefully people enjoy that. But obviously, I think the real prize, I'm not just saying that, is getting to talk to someone like Gary who has years of experience. So I'm going to also Seawick. Oh, so Mark just sent a thing. I would have never guessed Seawick. Thank you, Mark. I apologize about that, but I'm glad that you corrected me. So I'm going to jump into questions if you're ready, Gary.
Yeah, I'm ready. Let's go.
Perfect. The top one, because they do vote these up and down. I wave my hand like someone can see that. It actually is a question that says, this may get covered, but blind calling for bears. Now, I know you covered this a little bit, but you might want to go a little more into it. If so, how long do you give them before you move? I know you mentioned that. He asked rabbit or fawn calls. And so you might want to
Okay,
discuss
yeah,
that
okay.
versus maybe other calls as well.
Yeah, let's go into that. So I am okay with switching sounds midstream, okay? But if I'm hunting in an area where there's a lot of deer, I know that some bears want to eat deer. And they've eaten deer before. They've killed fawns, they've killed maybe a doe, and so deer distress, that's what I've been very successful with, is deer distress sounds. But I think maybe even better than deer distress sounds are calf elk sounds. And so I think calf elk calls have always been underrated for a lot of calling situations, and this is one of them. So I would, if hunting in Northeast Oregon, those bears definitely habituate to places where elk have their calves, and elk tend to have their calves in late May into early June. And so the bears, they know that, and they'll move up to those areas after they've been feeding on grass. So you get up there and you begin using calf elk sounds, and you're using a sound that they know means easy food. So definitely use that. Use it in the spring and use it again in the fall. It'll work in the fall too. But definitely, if you're in an area where you know there's bears, blind calling absolutely works. And you call for an hour, stay another 10 minutes, call constantly, change the sounds if you feel like you want to, doesn't matter. Don't overthink it, but try to sell a real scenario.
Yeah, and quick side note on that, Gary, I actually tried calling a bear in August when I was hunting down on the southern coast, and I saw it on blackberries, and I managed to sprint. It's about a mile away. Got over there and put up a number of different calls, and I called for what felt like forever. Probably wasn't. I'm guessing it was like 30, 40 minutes till it got dark. Never saw it. It probably circled around on me or something.
Yeah, and you don't know. You just don't know. I think we call a lot more animals than we actually see. And I know that. And my first time when I called a bear successfully and didn't shoot it, I called that bear for 43 minutes, and then a truck came along the road and spooked the bear off. And I would see flashes of it through the trees, and it was a big, big bear. And I thought I was going to get a shot at it, and I believed that I was going to call that bear to me. I'd called a coyote earlier that day, and I was on an elk hunt, and this bear was coming in. And if it hadn't been for somebody else on that road, maybe I would have got it. Maybe it would have got me.
Yeah, they can certainly get skittish. The next question, and these are going to kind of skip around because obviously they came in the order that they were asked. The next question is from Alex. He says, do you have a favorite bear recipe?
You know, we end up using some bear in sausage, and we use it, the back straps in steak. And I know that the first bear, we used a lot of spaghetti. That was a fish eating bear, so we were putting a lot of seasoning on that one. But tacos is good. And it's a lot of fun too to share that meat around with people, because there's a lot of people that haven't had a chance to eat bear, and so having people over and sharing it around that way, I think, is really good.
Yeah, and I'll agree with that. I think I fed a lot of people the bear I shot this spring, and we did burgers or beargers, and I just added in some duck fat and bear crumbs, and people were amazed how good it was. So
duck fat and bear crumbs. Okay, good.
Yeah. Did I say bear? I meant bread. Probably said bear.
Yeah, we knew what you meant.
Yeah. And then actually this kind of dovetails into that. Someone asks, when storing the rendered bear fat, do you freeze it?
Actually, I freeze it or keep it in the refrigerator. And so right now I've got some in the refrigerator, just a little bit left. I'm going to use for muzzle loading. And then other than that, I'll freeze it and then keep some rotating out into the fridge. I'm almost out though. It's time to get another fat bear.
Right. Okay. The next question says, for the Oregon Coast Range, is the best method to walk gated timber roads and look for clear cuts? It feels like there are so many food sources everywhere and there's such limited visibility in the forest. And that's a really pertinent question, I think.
Right. Okay. See, this is what gets all of us. We want to see a lot, and some of the habitat on the coast allows it and some doesn't. But what you're looking for is you're looking for one bear, and the opportunity to see that one bear, and you may find that at close range. And so I think we make a mistake when we get hung up on trying to see more country and getting frustrated maybe by not having the visibility we want. I think it's better to maybe try calling or watching an area that is a funnel for travel, for movement. And somebody in the questions asked about e-scouting. And I think there's absolutely a great opportunity to shorten your scouting by looking at topo maps, but especially Google Earth and using Onyx and whatever tools you have available. I love looking at aerial photos and, especially on Google Earth and trying to sort out access, but also don't get hung up on one spot to the exclusion of everything else. You need to have a plan A, B, C, and D, because other hunters might be scouting the same way you are and arrive at the same conclusions you've arrived at. And we've got a lot of bear hunters this year. I am super stoked to see how many people are excited about hunting bears. And I've been seeing this coming for a few years, and it's just exploding with new enthusiastic bear hunters. And I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, me too. I tell people all the time, it's one of my favorite species now to chase. So this one you kind of covered again, and I think it dovetails into the topography and kind of climate for bears. But again, I think it's pertinent to kind of go into some of maybe the details. So this question was, do you have any specific advice for Northwest Oregon spring bear? Or would you approach the Northwest tag the same way you would hunt bears, for example, with a Southwest Oregon tag?
I would approach it the same way. If you have access to private land, like dairy land, for instance, where the bears might come out of the woods and feed on grass on the edges of the trees, like you can find in the Wilson unit, for instance, use that access. But again, you're looking for one bear. And you don't have to be hung up on being able to see a lot of ground from one spot. What you're really looking for is a place where a bear is going to walk through or feed through. And then if you have access to closed road, or you've hiked in to a place and you're the only one in there, definitely call. And if you can't, you don't have a unit like this, get a mouth call. They work just as well, and you can vary the sounds, and you'll have a lot of success. And I say you'll have a lot of success, but what I mean is you'll have the same amount of success as you would using an electronic call. And then I guess I should say something about that too. I'll have a whole bunch of unsuccessful call sets in the course of a 5-day hunt. And you just have to put in the time in order to have the those moments where a bear does show up. You just got to put in the time and believe that it works, because it does work.
Yeah, that's great. And I agree with you. I mean, I've hunted both. Those are the two most common areas well, actually not Northwest, but Northeast and Southwest are the common areas that I've hunted. But
yeah, I want to touch on one thing about bears per square mile. Again, we're only looking for one bear. And there's parts of the state that have higher concentrations of bears. So Northeast Oregon, Southwest Oregon, and same with Washington. There's places where there's concentrations of bears. But if you have a place where there's lower bear numbers, just go to the feed. It's all about the feed.
And I'm going to kind of lump three questions together, which I know is dangerous, but they're all sort of kind of tangenting off of the prior couple questions. So one person asked, what weather conditions do you like? And another person asked, are bears seen or taken at a most common time of day? So I thought those kind of tied together. And since we were just talking about the calls as well, in conjunction with maybe the weather, the time of the day, someone asked, what mouth call are you using? Like a fawn or what? So I know that's a lot, and I can repeat one of those if you need me to.
Okay, those are great questions. If I forget something, just remind me. Weather conditions. Ideally, I would like to be hunting when after a rain and the sun is coming out, and it just feels good to be out there. The sun is warming the grass. That is ideal. And as far as time of day, they could come in at any time of day. And so I don't get hung up on that as much. But if you're going to take some time off, I wouldn't necessarily get up super early, but then I would hunt all the rest of the day. So if you're in camp and you're trying to manage your time, get up, make yourself a nice breakfast, and then get out and go hunting and stay out and hunt the rest of the day. But get yourself a good breakfast, and if you can't hunt all day long, manage it that way. And then maybe I would start my last call set of the day with 2 hours left in the day. And then you don't want to call too late, because then you end up not having the light you need when that black animal comes into view. So make sure you have enough light left for that last call set. But it can happen anytime. And, sometimes they're sleeping. Sometimes they're not hungry. Sometimes they're not motivated, but maybe the next day they are.
And which mouth call are you using? And actually, I was curious about that one too, because I haven't used a mouth call, so I didn't know if they were hard to use or if you just blow on it. Or so this person asked what mouth call you were using, and my question would be if they're hard to use.
Okay, they're not hard to use. So a rabbit distress call can be made to sound like a deer in distress, and Skiri makes this little calf call that's great. And Dan Clore has a really good little calf call that I like. And the crying hot cow elk call, all that stuff. Hoochie Mama can be put into use, and you're trying to make it sound like a lost calf. And if you've ever heard a lost elk calf that's scared, and I have, they call frequently and loudly, and they get the attention of the herd. They're trying to call the herd back to them. And when bears are focused on eating elk calves in late May, when they're looking for those actively, I think that's a really good option. And then there's cub squall mouth calls that you can get as well. And so I would have one of those too, especially for May kind of calling. And don't be afraid to mix it up. I would have 3 mouth calls. If I didn't have my electronic call with me, I would have at least 3 mouth calls with me of different types.
Great. Yeah, that's super helpful, because I think calling is one of those things that kind of intimidates people because they don't necessarily know how to do it. But also, you're bringing a bear in, which a lot of us sort of think do I really want to call this thing to me since it's got claws and teeth? Another good question here. This one says, any suggestion for timber hunting bear aside from clear cuts?
Yeah. Okay. So in the timber, there's what I think about mostly is roads that are cut through the timber, and a lot of these roads are old roads and they have established grass growing along them, and those are places where bears will feed down, and they'll feed on that grass until somebody comes along that road. And so if you're the only person on that road and you've got the wind right, then you can actually walk up on feeding bears. And then if you can watch, see, this is what I would try to do, is I'd try to keep the wind in my favor and then watch a section of road that has grass like that on it. And you can find places like that by using Google Earth and scouting that way.
Awesome. Well, that's good, because obviously there is a lot of timbered area out there that's, if you can get into it, it has a lot of opportunity. And you kind of covered. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. Bears in the fall are eating a lot of berries. Okay. And if they're hitting a certain kind of berry, they're going to move to those berry fields along closed roads and trails. And you can sit, if you got the wind, you can sit and watch a place like that. And you're not very far from the target area. I mean, we're talking 20 yards, 30 yards, but you can sit and watch those places if you have the wind right. It's all a matter of being in one good place. And as far as berries go, there was one day in the Cascades when we were hunting elk and bears at the same time, and we cut the tracks of 17 different bears in one day on a fresh snow, 2 inches of snow in the Cascades. And we cut the tracks of 17 different bears that day. It was a big huckleberry season, and they were on the huckleberries all the way till Halloween. They were eating the old huckleberries. And man, what a day. We didn't get a bear that day, but we had some amazing experiences that day.
Yeah, that sounds awesome to me. And I know you've already covered this, but I think this is a good kind of, again, additional question to when you were talking about caliber. This person asked, what is the best minimum caliber for hunting bears? Because as you and I know, there's a lot of ballistics out there, and you and I have delved down this rabbit hole. So without spending 2 hours on ballistics.
People get hung up on this, and so I try not to get hung up on it, but this is a really great question. I'm glad that they asked, because my choice is a 30-06 as the minimum. Now, somebody else might say, well, okay, well, 308. And I'd say, yeah, 308. But my choice, it's personal, and I'm saying the 30-06. And another good choice is a 338 Win Mag and 300 Winchester Magnum. But I'd say the minimum for me would be a 30-06. But if a guy has a 270 or something like that, use it. Absolutely. 7 mag.
I think a lot of that is obviously knowing your rifle and the ammo you're using, of course. So.
Use good bullets. Yeah, if you can even find bullets, use good ones.
Yeah, I got lucky. I bought quite a bit of the Nosler AccuBond right before everything kind of went belly up on that. So, and more kind of on strategy end, this person asks, what's the difference between, and you've kind of covered some of this, so maybe if it feels like it's repetitive, obviously just give it some highlights or some things like that. But what is the difference between spring and fall hunt strategy, if there were like just a couple things to really nail down on that?
Okay. All right. So I would focus on spot and stock, grassy slopes, moving up to elk cow calving areas in the spring. And then in the fall, I would focus on berries, moving into calling for bears who want to eat meat. So berries and calling, and then grass and calling focused on deer distress or elk distress.
Perfect. Okay. And this person asks, oh, I know this person. They ask, what about areas with little snow or bears that don't hibernate? When to start and where to focus? So I think obviously they must be chatting about spring bear, probably because they have a tag. Lucky them.
Yes. And yeah, I say there's places in California where the bears don't seem to hibernate, or some bears don't hibernate. And so if they're starting early, there's going to be some grass that's coming up. I mean, I'm getting new growth here at my place in Bend right now. So I know that there's going to be some good grass early in April. But also think about oak trees, where there's big stands of oak, where there's acorns on the ground, where they could go rooting around and find acorns is another opportunity.
With the spring on that, Gary, this is kind of a question I'm asking. Are you also kind of playing the rut, so to speak? Because I mean, obviously in the spring, I know a lot of people say, well, wait till basically the end of the season because they're fully in rut, so to speak.
I wouldn't focus on those types of things until about in the middle of May.
Okay.
But if you have cub distress sounds, you want to try using cub distress bear sounds, give it a shot and call that way. And you can do that with mouth calls, and you can do it with electronics.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
I think we try to use the same sounds to do different things a lot. I think we can mix it up a lot more than we do.
Okay, good to know. And you chatted about e-scouting, but do you have any like e-scouting tips on like the topography you're looking for or anything in that nature?
Okay, let's just talk springtime. I would be looking at what are the south-facing slopes, especially early in the season, because that's where the grass is going to pop up first. And then late in the season, that's where the grass is going to cure, and then there won't be bears on that cured grass. You want to be where the grass is fresh and shooting up, coming up. And so those south-facing slopes are good early, bad later. And then it's more of the north-facing slopes where the sun is just starting to peek in, and then down in the places where the sun is reaching in late April that maybe it wasn't reaching earlier in the season. So those openings, and they don't have to be big openings. They just have to be a place where a bear might, get a little bit of feed part of the day.
Okay, good to know. Next question says, how large of a home range will a dominant boar have, and will they range long distance in the rut?
Okay, so every bear is different than every other bear, but they will range a long distance. And I've heard the number be as big as 30 square miles. And I think that's probably more than most would use. And it really has to do with the food that's available. But a bear that found salmon, for instance, and fed on salmon, at the end of a year, one time, like say in October, that bear is going to go back and look for those salmon that next season. And even if it doesn't find the salmon there, it'll go the next season after that. They have good memories, and they get into a rotation of where the food is, and that's what dictates the size of their home range. And in places where food is available, their home ranges are smaller. And where there's competition from other bears, their home ranges are smaller because they don't want to keep bumping into other bears they have to fight with.
Cool. This next one I think is a good question, but I think this person just needs to take us to their spot because they say, I have 2 spots I've seen bears. So right there, I'm like, well,
There you go.
just invite me and Gary. And so he has 2 spots he's seen bears and 2 spots that they've been told about bears from loggers. Should I keep hitting those spots or should I find new spots? Is their question.
Oh, man. Okay, so I go back to my cousin Neil called me and he says, Gary, I've spent $2,000 this fall in gas, just going from clear cut to clear cut. And he said, I'm either going to give up or I'm going to keep going until I get one. And I said, you just have to sit in one place. And so he did that. He began to study ballistics and he sat in one place. And that next May, he killed his bear, his first bear, and still, his biggest one. And it was because he finally changed his habits and sat in one place. And so to answer this question, I would say, if you're getting that kind of intel and you know where you've seen bears in the past, there'll be bears there again. And if a bear gets shot, there'll be a bear in that spot 2 weeks later because the habitat means that bears want to be there.
Yeah, I always say when you're seeing animals, it's or any critter, it's the same thing with steelheading. You don't leave fish and you don't leave deer and you don't leave bear for more bear. Sort of.
Oh man, you don't leave bear to find other bear,
and you don't leave fish to find more fish because there they are. And the same person asked actually kind of a follow up, which is great, which says because you were talking about sitting on that spot, and they say when you sit on one spot, how much time are we talking about?
8 hours. 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day. Yeah. And you do what you have to do mentally to stay in the game. And if that means you bring a book or a crossword puzzle, do that. It's okay. And, you could sit in one place, and if you have a way to keep your mind occupied, do it, stay in one place. Because sometimes that bear is there the whole time and it's just sleeping. And then it wakes up and you see it. That happens over and over again.
Awesome. And this is a good one, actually, because I have no idea the answer of it. I would say talk to ODFW biologist, but this person asks, any idea how many bears there are in an area like bears per square mile, for example, in Western Oregon?
Okay. So I asked a biologist in Western Oregon this question one time, and he said, the further you go to the ocean and the farther south you go, the higher the numbers get. And, if you think about what that means, is there's a lot of mingling, a lot of bear activity around human civilization. And in that same conversation, he told me that, last week a bear went into a kitchen and was eating cornflakes when the homeowner came down the stairs. So those kinds of things happen. And so don't feel like you have to be way back in the backcountry because there's bears right, close to the water, close to, where people are too.
Yeah. And for that question, for anyone who's looking online, I would tell you that ODFW does list all of the harvest rates for each unit. So, it's just one indicator, but it's a piece of data you have where you can go online and see what the success rates are in every unit. And then you can say, oh, well, these 2 or 3 units are the most successful. There's a reason why. Probably.
And all this, yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. And all the states do this. They have the data that you can sort through and try to figure out. But again, you only need one bear.
True enough. This next one's a great one because I have zero knowledge on this because I don't bow hunt much. This person asked, do you have any bow hunting specific tips and tactics?
Okay. As really, first of all, really study your arrow placement and think about the shots that you'll get and the angle for those shots, because that's super, super important. And then you have to really focus in on where the bears are going to be, and then try to be in the places where they are before they get there. And so I guess for me, I know people are successful with archery equipment calling for bears, but I'm not sure that would be something I would sign up for.
Up close and personal.
Yeah, well, I'm all about that, but I want that bear to walk past me, not come to me. I want it to walk past me, and I'm taking the shot as it's quartering away. And so then I would be focused on being in the right spot for the wind and watching the trail that the bear's that I anticipate a bear to walk on. And if I'm in a tree stand, I don't want it to be too steep of an angle. I want to be closer, more on the bear's level, the better, and not shooting from up above, because you may only get one lung, and that's a hard bear to recover.
And this person, another question. This one kind of goes. There's going to be a couple here. It looks like on the meat itself again. Can you talk about the difference in fall versus spring bear meat, and any cooking strategies you might have?
Okay, yeah. So we like to marinate things, and so for cooking, we really, really like to marinate, and so that's another thing. Using the pellet grill with different types of wood. We use a Camp Chef pellet grill, and we use different types of wood pellets. But the difference between fall bear and spring bear, it really comes down to what they're eating. The bear I want to eat most is the bear that has been eating nuts and berries in the fall. So especially if it's been eating apples, pears, blackberries, wow, that's the best bear you can get. Wild cherries, that's the best eating that you can get. For the best hides, if it's all about the rug, fish bears. So if, that's going to Alaska and hunting Prince of Wales Island and the Chugach National Forest, anywhere where they're eating a lot of fish, they're going to have really luxurious hides.
Do you find the hide better in the spring or fall?
I don't really get hung up on that. My best hide that I have was a spring bear, but some spring bears are rubbed, and I don't get hung up on that either. I'm just a bear hunter.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Although the first one I was after, I definitely wanted that rug, so I made sure she had a beautiful coat. So
yeah.
And this also is on the food aspect, and this person asked, what about testing for trichinosis? Do you have any information on that?
The way I understand it with trichinosis is you just cook it well, and you're safe from that. I wouldn't eat wild boar, or I was in a camp in Africa once where they were serving warthog medium rare, and man, I sure didn't want to eat that. So yeah, you just cook it. Yeah. Cook it well, and I think the way I understand it, you don't have any problems if you cook it well.
Yeah, and I will say I did a lot of looking on that, of course, this last spring and last year, and most of what I found online, they'll give you temperature ranges, but it's usually around 160, and then it has to be held there for a couple minutes. So it just depends on the cut, and you can obviously mitigate drying out with marinades or with
exactly,
things like that. So
yeah, good point, man. These are some of the best questions that I've ever had. I love having this Q&A. I mean, this is better than what I came up with.
Yeah, well,
These
BHA
questions.
people are often foodies, so they're going to ask you a lot of food questions, both on what the bears eat and what they want to eat. So,
Yeah.
uh, actually, speaking of that, someone did ask, and I know you kind of covered this, unless you have anything besides the acorn to add. This person asked, "What do the fall food sources look like aside from berries?" And of course, I know acorns myself, but is there anything else that one can focus on in the fall?
Okay, apples are huge. If you have apples, pears, and anything that you like to eat, bears like to eat too. So it can be plums and all different sorts of berries. So we typically just lump it into berries, but they all come ripe at different times. There's salmon berries and blackberries and huckleberries and mountain blueberries and a whole bunch of others that I can't. Hawthorn berries, super important. So
Yeah, I can personally attest to that. I've seen out east just giant piles of bear scat that are bright orange from all the hawthorn they're eating and nothing
mhm,
else.
mhm.
And
So
then, oh, I'm sorry. I
I
apologize
think
about you. Finish
you, you have. I think there's really times when they're just going to focus on one food source, and you think, "Wow, the apples are ready. They're going to be on the apples." Well, not necessarily. They might get around to the apples a month later because there's still apples hanging on the trees, and then they'll start falling to the ground. And what you think is a ripe apple, they may not think is a ripe apple. They're, and they all, they have different things they like as well. Like bears are individuals, but focus the food source changes week to week in the spring and in the fall.
And then this is a question actually I ask because I'm just curious because I might start hunting in some of the other states aside from Oregon. If you are using bait, does all bait work the same? Is there like a best bait? I mean, I've heard everything from dog food to donuts to molasses.
And then again, it comes down to what do those bears eat regularly? And some bears in some areas seem to have a sweet tooth. Some bears don't want fish. Some bears want fish. It depends on the area and what they've been exposed to. And in some states, there's a lot of wolves, like Minnesota, Wisconsin, there's a lot of wolves, Alaska. And if you're using any sort of meat, dog food, or whatever, fish, the wolves get there before the bears do.
Hmm.
And so if you use things like mixed nuts and hard candy and stuff like that, the wolves aren't going to pay much attention to that. And then the bears will find that a more reliable food source. So it really varies from place to place. And for my money and time, I would hire a guide who's got that wired already.
Okay. Good. And then this question, I think, is kind of an addition, probably mostly to the archery one, though I think it's still relevant to rifle. And this person asks, why quartering away?
Because of the rib cage. And if you can get the arrow into the rib cage, it funnels down to where the heart is, and it just seems to guide the arrow there. And so those quartering away shots just seem much more high percentage for the archery hunter. And then people want to know about muzzleloader hunting, and man, I love muzzleloader hunting, but I hunt with a rifle now. from some experiences that I've had, I hunt with a rifle that I can get a quick second shot with. And if I'm hunting deer and I have a bear tag and a bear gives me an opportunity, oh man, yeah, you bet, I'll take that shot. But I'm using a 54 caliber muzzleloader now, and that's what I really like. And so a big bullet, big hole, big chunk of lead, lots of energy. But give me a bolt action rifle for my number one choice.
Yeah, those follow-ups are nice. And like you say, if you have multi-species in your pocket, it sure is nice.
Yeah.
And this question actually also goes over back to the calling and the timber scenarios. And they say in the timber scenarios with a grass-covered walk-only road, where would you place the Fox Pro or similar kind of electronic call?
Okay, so that's kind of mixing up my hunting strategies, but I would most like to just watch a place like that. But if I'm going to bank on calling in a situation like that, I'm going to place it in a place where I can watch downwind of the call. And then this is a time when you can use some cover scents like skunk or fox or whatever, and put that. I would use, I tend to use fox or coyote scent. Put that call in a spot where you can watch the downwind side. And so you could keep the call in view and then watch 20 yards, 30 yards, 100 yards if possible downwind of that, because they like to circle and come in from the downwind side. And if you're using a remote and you can set that call in such a spot, you can be 100 yards from the call and still operate it well and have your scent maybe out of the prevailing wind. I think that makes a lot of sense. And the more I think about it, the better I like that question. Yeah. I mean, man, I'm excited. I got a bear tag in my pocket right now.
Oh, you're making me jealous. And this next question is actually one that I love hearing because it's one that I teach a lot in Hunter's Ed. So I just have a fondness for it. But I definitely want to hear your answer to this, which that person asks, is it better to take a lung shot or break the shoulder, and why one over the other?
In this case, with a bear, I want to break the shoulders. I want to break both shoulders. And then I'm going to get the lungs at the same time. That's what I'm trying to do. If I end up just getting the lungs, I've got a double lung shot, and that's a bear that's not going anywhere anyway. But yeah. My first 9 bears that I was involved with in hunting situations all got spooky and Western, and breaking shoulders cures all of that. And it's all better when you have a good bullet and good bullet placement.
Yeah. And I like it because it anchors them where they're at, so you hopefully don't have to try and chase them down.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. That so far is all the questions we had. And so unless anyone chips up something at the last minute, again, Gary, I just want to say thank you so much for your time, and really, again, encourage people to check out your TV show and podcast, because like I said, I watch the TV show and certainly listen to the podcast frequently. Lots of knowledge there that you can pick up as your seasons go on different topics. And thanks again to everyone who chipped in, Gary and Nosler and BHA for the prizes. We'll make sure we again email those prize winners to get their information, to get stuff sent out. So congrats on that. And again, get your public landowner t-shirt, find out what BHA is all about, why we think we're one of the better conservation organizations out there. And overall, I just hope everyone had a really great time. I'm seeing a lot of thanks. So hope everyone goes out and goes bear hunting and at least sees some bears or has some great times out in the woods personally. But do you have anything to add, Gary?
I would just say, if you have a bear tag this spring, also get yourself a turkey tag, bring your shotgun, and try to bag a turkey while you're out there. Don't get hung up on you're afraid you're scared of the bear by shooting the turkey, because these animals, they hear gunshots all year long and they don't typically get scared of them unless they're being shot at. So have fun, and remember that the harvest success on bear hunts is lower than most anything else that we do, but there's a really good conservation reason for doing bear hunts, and there's some of the funnest things that you'll do. People who haven't ever killed a bear, they hunt year after year because they just love being out there and spending the time with their friends. When the sun is warming up those hillsides, it's just great being out there and remembering, we're free people in a free country, and living in a spirit of abundance instead of a spirit of scarcity. And this makes us better people. It makes us get through some of the stuff we have to get through in life, and it seems to make it worthwhile, and maybe you'll make more money too.
You never know. I do want to add real quick. I saw on the side someone said they were bummed they missed part of the night, or maybe had battery issues. Just as a reminder, these actually are recastable, so you can use the same link, come back, watch the whole thing. We'll also be putting it to our YouTube page and put those links on our other social media so people can watch it kind of on demand. So tell your friends about it if they couldn't come or they just didn't know about it and they have an interest. Have them check out Gary and obviously all the wealth of information, and again, all of his various channels as well. So really appreciate everyone. I hope you have a great start to your week, a great night, and a great 2021, and everything's looking up. So Gary, I'm sure I'll come see you over there soon, and
Please
maybe
do.
go get fishing or something like that.
Yeah.
Jesse, if you're listening up, go ahead and wrap it up. And again, just everyone, thanks so much and good night.